Morbid curiosity may inquire you to ask, why is it that there's a sock on my microphone? Well, the answer is simple. It is either that I put a sock on my microphone, or I use the sock to cover my massive dick. Let me tell you a story of pirateers on the massive seas of the dark web. Certainly, perhaps there still are pirates that roam the seas in the midst of this day, but nay, the pirates we must endure, or we must become, are those of the internet. Once upon a time, there I was, having a nice sea shanty amongst the World Wide Web. Not a care in my mind, and nothing as far as the eye could see but the blue skies and the digital waters. This was like back in the early 2000s, and therefore they didn't properly know how to, program water to look like water, so it kind of just looked like sludge. But that sludge was beautiful to me nonetheless, and off I went on my nice little dinghy, rowing back and forth, pretending that I was one of the greatest captains to ever roam the seas of the web. But fate had other plans for me, for it truly desired me to realize that I was in nothing more than a dinghy. For in the midst of those open seas that you could see as long as you could type, it turned out that I was never alone. My eyes deceived me, for the mirage of the waters, those very low polygon, squubby waters, they were home to another ship. A ship much larger than mine, a ship that did not need the imagination to be a king. This ship here was larger than me, larger than 10 me's. I stared up at it as it rolled right past me. It nearly hit my poor little dinghy. But it turned out that their intention was not to ram me, nay, they had further intentions with me. The pirates, they all looked over their starboard side and laughed at me and my tiny little boat. And then they took their little virus baby boy puppy pet things and had them all come after me. So many that it caused my little dinghy to sink, and they chucked an anchor my direction as my only means of survival in those sloppy waters. What has cursed me to become this fate, I thought, but oh, I did not know what was in store. For they raised that anchor and let their viruses drown in the sea, but they raised me up so I could stand on their poop deck. Drenched in low-res water I was as they kicked me back and forth on their poop deck, constantly making poop jokes, and then eventually just straight up pooping on me. Turns out that they were very hearty folk, but they just had a very heavy hazing technique that they demanded all of their crew members to endure. For that was my fate. After I was covered with weeks' worth of pirate diarrhea, a man in a white mask with a big fancy mustache waltzed over to me and demanded an audience, and halted his crew from their heinous crimes against my well-being. I was at the feet of Captain Anonymous, ruler of the deep web and the 7 seas. He picked me up and offered me a quest.
Boy,
he said,
it is imperative that you join our crew, for you must be one with us. It is imperative that we go to our primary solution of freedom for all.
At first I thought I was speaking to a woman, giving the contonation of his voice, but it turned out that nay, this was the voice of a genius, the voice of a man who could change his voice in real life. Because those people don't exist. And if I refuse, I said.
You will not refuse,
he said in reply. I did not see any lack in logic that he had there, and therefore I simply obligated myself to his crew. Unfortunately, the first thing that he did was say,
But first, you need a thorough cleaning.
And he threw me back over the edge of the boat to get all the feces off of my body. Never before have I endured a more salty cleansing. This was the beginning of many adventures upon the deep web sea. There were many things that I saw that I cannot unsee. It turns out there were so many things that this pirateer had intentions for the good of all men, but also for the good of himself. For amidst taking down the greatest of thieves amongst the ports, he would always make sure to enjoy a little bit of shanty shenanigans every time that he came across a low-life vessel amidst the waters of the deep web. His moral compass was nothing I had the ability to understand, and therefore I simply did not ask questions and did my job. I was the one to stand at the very tippity top of this thing that they have on the, what do you call those, the mast. I was at the tippity top of the mast. I was the man who stared into the ocean, staring hopelessly for miles and miles in every direction, simply wishing for any sign of anything at all. At this time, I was greatly afraid of heights, but my reward was fantastic. I got to endure the greatest of fruits amidst the deep web. Literally, I mean, they gave me like pears, they gave me avocados. Avocados are apparently fruit now, I had no idea. And from this, I had the opportunity to create the greatest of jams and jellies to put on my toast anytime that we found bread that wasn't soggy. The pirate's life, it's not for anyone really. It just grows on you. Ages went on in this way. Ages went on. I continued on his crew, for I had nowhere else to go. Heaven knows the only place that I had to go home to was a land that I could only afford a dinghy. And oh, the antics we got up to, hacking into every little port, spreading viruses to every boat, nifting all these silly little trinkets from every individual we came across. Did you know that there are some people that like to hold tater tots in their pants, not in their pockets, in their pants, and they're not even cooked, they're just straight up frozen. They just put them down their pants. Why do they do that? I don't know, but I mean, like, we were very hungry that week, so needless to say, it was not a good time. But oh, after all the plots that we had and all the plunder that we gained, Captain Anonymous became very bored with the way that things were going. He wanted more, greater, stronger, faster, harder. I don't remember how the rest of that song goes. But either way, he took it up like Daft Punk and went back to the poop deck, which was thoroughly clean since I had my hazing.
Gentlemen,
he said, with a voice that could scare thousands in its wake,
I believe we must go into higher waters.
His second-in-command, who was named Goose, was thoroughly confused as to what he meant, and therefore, obviously, asked for clarification. What do you mean, my good Sir Anonymous? Which is kind of confusing. I don't really know how he got that accent, because it wasn't the one that he had when I first showed up.
We are going to acquire the biggest bounty we have ever had.
This part I heard from the very top of the mast, and I could not help but scream down below. Hey, what do you mean?
Pirates of the ship Anonymous. We are going after Facebook.
At first I thought I simply did not hear him clearly, for surely he did not think of doing something as sinister as that. Facebook? His second-in-command said. Facebook? Why? Why are we going after Facebook? Can't help but notice that his accent would consistently change. I think that he was going through a speech modulator that he found online.
Yes, the reign of Mark Zuckerberg has gone on long enough. I believe it is time to take over.
I didn't even comprehend what he could possibly have in store, and the worst part is he simply didn't tell us. He just said,
sit tight and watch the fireworks, bae.
Not sure why he was using that kind of wording. Internet people are weird. But our captain did not sway us yet. He kept us on high waters and high booty, and therefore we just simply played along. So off we sailed onto the grand week-long journey to Facebook. The journey should have taken us 2 weeks, but we had the greatest captain on the seas. It was even on an opposing side of the continent that we were amidst, and nonetheless we trekked there without shame and without mercy. Our coffers were nearly overloaded, and we hadn't even gone to the grand prize yet. But alas, within a week's time, we had finally made it to the port of Facebook. The captain then eluded us a fraction of his plan so that we may know our instruction.
Take the coffers of gold and put them everywhere throughout the city.
Everywhere throughout the city? We earned this money.
You must be out of your bloody mind, Captain,
The second-in-command said.
Shut your face hole,
He replied.
do your freaking job.
He had never once used an explicative the entire time that we were under his command, nor did he use a replacement for an explicative. The fact that he said freaking meant that he meant business, and therefore we questioned nothing, and off we went, putting on our disguises as Facebook accounts and taking those coffers and putting them within every nook and cranny we could find.
I, for one, particularly put my coffer within a subway bathroom stall as memento for the moment that I first joined these shanty shenanigan people on the deep, dark, murky blah blah.
After our instructions were complete, me and the other crew began to head back to the ship, but it turns out the Captain Anonymous was standing at the port, demanding that we join him. His second-in-command was very worried about his choices, fearing that his ambition had taken over his mind.
Captain, do you think this is a good idea? We might get caught here.
No, we won't.
He replied.
I want you to see the fireworks.
We were all thoroughly confused as to what he meant, but nonetheless, once we all were gathered at the port, we sat and we waited. Individuals walking past us, seeing the mask on our captain's face, gave them much displeasure. Surely they were creating a plan to speak to the authorities. However, we apparently were just in time, or perhaps Captain Anonymous already had a plan set in motion that we knew nothing about, for there was nobody to take our hands and throw us into any sort of holding cell of any kind. Not even like a fun one, not even like a bouncy castle. And as soon as the entire crew finally made it back to the port, and we all waited for Stewart, because Stewart was always so slow. He was a marathon runner. We don't understand why he took so long. Our captain took out a big shiny red button from his waistcoat. We all gathered around with a morbid curiosity to see what he had next in store, to which he only replied,
I hope you enjoyed the gold, and you, Mark Zuckerberg.
With this final war cry, he pushed the button, and seconds later, every single building went ablaze. It turns out that within every coffer that we hid our gold, there was a virus bomb waiting inside that would turn everything that came into contact with the explosion into the thing that was in the coffers. All the buildings, all the streets, all the people turned to gold. So much gold. Gold for miles. Gold shining with its polygonal majesty. Oh, the craze that we enjoyed. The cheering that could not be heard from anyone because I think there were only like 30 of us. But nonetheless, we screamed in wow, in awe, in wonder. We all prepared to turn and cheer for our captain. But Anonymous was nowhere to be found. Apparently, his final deed was done. Mark Zuckerberg was no more. Facebook had fallen, and the world was back to the way it once was, lucrative as ever. We all stared at one another with utter confusion and had no proposition to make. Not even the second-in-command had anything to say. And so, after the reality settled in, we all found cups within the rubble, and we grabbed a liquid of choice and cheered our captain to wherever Valhalla he lay. After which we all took the gold and agreed that it was best that Captain Anonymous's legacy lay with him, and we chose to move our separate ways. I bid my fellow crew farewell, and I straight up kicked Stewart right in the balls, and I ran away. So off I went with my wagon of gold to return to the place where this all started, the place from whence I came. All I could think of to purchase was a little cabin off of the coast, and a little dinghy, in hopes that just another crew might be dumb enough to pick me up once again. So there you have my stories of the adventures in the deep dark web. But I warn you now, don't bother go looking for my gold.